Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kelly Baden, the Director of Reproductive Rights at State Innovation Exchange. Thanks for calling in this afternoon. I'm going to dive right in, although I think some other folks are still joining us, but this webinar is being recorded, so feel free to share it with colleagues and other interested parties afterwards, and we'll send around that link. I'm going to kick us off just for a couple of minutes before I turn it over to our great speaker today. This webinar is on 45 years after Roe v. Wade, what we don't know about public opinion on abortion because we've never asked. I shamelessly stole that title from our speaker, and as she goes through the data and her findings, you'll see why it makes sense, because it really is some new ways of asking about public opinions on abortion that is different from the kind of 45 years that we've been doing that. So before I turn it over to her, I just want to talk for a second about SIX's Reproductive Health Rights and Justice Program. This webinar is open to all legislators in the SIX network, so there might be some on here who are not part of our Reproductive Freedom Leadership Council. So this launched in January, and we are up to nearly 250 state legislators from 43 states, and hopefully growing, who have, as part of this council, endorsed a really compelling and beautiful platform of principles, our vision and values statement around our beliefs in achieving a world of reproductive justice and autonomy for all people, and in the role that U.S. state legislators play in helping us achieve that. This is part of the platform. A lot of this is all on SIX's website. So you can go to stateinnovation.org and go to the reproductive rights section on the issues tab and read through all of this great work. We convene the RFLC, the Leadership Council, in a variety of ways. We have bi-weekly communications with lots of information and resources. We do webinars like this. We do a lot of amplification of your voices. You can see here some examples of how we launched with an exclusive article on Cosmo.com, and with 5 incredible legislators sharing their own stories about why they care about issues of reproductive freedom. We continue to work with legislators around the country on promoting, again, your voices and your perspectives. We partner with a variety of organizations. You can see just a snapshot of examples here to share some of their resources and information and new findings with you all as legislators. We also do more in-state and national amplification of your voices. We just had a piece go up today on Rewire News from 3 legislators from 3 different states talking about the connections between the various kinds of bans on abortion that are moving in each of their states, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Iowa, and how that's really all part of a coordinated strategy to try to overturn Roe. So we would love to work with you. If you're not a member of the RFLC already, we would love to have you join and endorse that platform. You can do that on our website. I will also chat out the link later, the direct link to sign up. And then I want to flag, I think my slides are a little bit stuck, Vanessa, but we have a couple of webinars and other opportunities that really are exclusive only to Reproductive Freedom Leadership Council members. And so the next one is actually a week from right now. And the invitation just went out, and you can see here it's a really, I think, incredible opportunity to talk directly to an amazing abortion provider who's done a lot of policy work as well, and really kind of go through some of the medical overview of pregnancy, contraception, and abortion, and see how that connects directly to state policy. So email me, Kelly at stateinnovation.org, to register if you have not gotten that invitation, and I will chat out the RFLC and sign-up link later. Vanessa, if you want to start sharing screen for our presenter, I can move into introducing her. So as I said, really excited to have Tresa Undem with us this afternoon to walk through some of these new findings. Tresa Undem is a partner at PerryUndem, which is a research, messaging, and communications firm. Tresa has done public opinion research for about 15 years for various nonprofit organizations, foundations, universities, government agencies, et cetera, and has done this on a number of healthcare issues, including reproductive rights, including LGBT issues, and also food and nutrition issues. So she really has been leading the way in the past couple of years with some of this groundbreaking research on public opinion on abortion and asking questions a little bit differently to get some more nuanced responses so we can sort of move beyond that really kind of polarized understanding of sort of a 50-50 split that people tend to think about when we think about public opinion on abortion. So with that said, I will turn it over to Tresa. Again, just some housekeeping. Chat in your questions while they come up, and we can have Tresa address them in the moment if that makes sense, and then otherwise we can wait till the end, and we'll also open up the phone lines at the end for more discussion. So with that, Tresa, take it away. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. So our firm, we're based in D.C. We're a nonpartisan firm. We don't do candidate polling or polling for political parties. We're really issue-based. And as Kelly said, we've done some work on abortion and for clients and for organizations. And what we walked away from, a lot of the work we do is qualitative, so we're doing in-depth interviews, we're doing focus groups, we're listening to how people talk, and what we found out is in that when you talk to people about abortion, it is so different from what we think public opinion on abortion is because the polling is so bad. And our firm, about once a year, we are able to do a project that's independent and that we just kind of follow our curiosities and do a project. Last year, it was right after the presidential election. We did a massive survey on sexism and women's rights and that kind of thing. This year, we did it on abortion. So we actually worked with reporters, and everything in this project is public. We started with 6 focus groups, and then we did a survey. So again, the reason we as researchers were so curious is this is the question that you'll often see cited, that reporters often cite, that policymakers are aware of. It's this question about should abortion be legal in all cases, most cases, illegal in most cases, illegal in all cases. And this is from Pew, and it's about 50-50 split, a little bit more favoring legal in all or most cases. This question, if you ask among voters, it's less split. So this is the most recent poll we've seen among voters. I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but this is from Quinnipiac. It was a couple months ago in December among 1,200 voters. So 60% of voters say that abortion should be legal in all cases or most cases, and that tends to be how researchers lump these together. Legal in all or most, illegal in most or all. So 60% legal in all or most, 34% illegal in most or all cases. Here's what's interesting is, okay, so 60-30 split. To me, that's not quite divided. I mean, there's a 26-point divide there. And what's interesting is you can see how the pollster in their press release said the abortion issue continues to divide the nation, right? Again, 60-34, not quite a division. And in fact, the paragraph above in their press release, they say American voters oppose 62-36% building a wall. Okay, so it's the exact same margin, 62-36 versus 60-34, and they've framed the results very differently. Abortion divides the nation. American voters oppose a wall. So even there's this really strong narrative, and I think that many of us have internalized that this is a divisive issue, the public is divided. Voters are not so divided. So we wanted to dig into this. And also, by the way, this question, first of all, it's been legal for 45 years. So pollsters asked this question to track opinion over time, but in my mind, as I came to this issue, I was like, wow, this is such an archaic question. Yes, let's track over time, but then it seems to be the polling just seems so one-dimensional. Gallup asked here on the left, with respect to the abortion issue, would you consider yourself to be pro-choice or pro-life? Well, guess what? This is again among adults. Voters tend to be a little bit more pro-choice, but 49% pro-choice, 46% pro-life. Okay, again, this is the narrative. It's split. The public is split on this issue. We did a poll with Vox where we gave people the option to say I'm neither pro-choice or pro-life, or I'm both pro-choice and pro-life. And guess what? 39% of the public doesn't identify with either of those labels. And so when you look at it that way, only 26% of the public is pro-life and 32% is pro-choice. So again, you change one small thing about the answer categories, you have a totally different picture. So we wanted to, there's these questions that are asked over and over again. We wanted to ask new questions. We wanted to ask questions that get at many different dimensions of this issue. And we did focus groups first, and then we took what we learned in focus groups and put it into a national survey. Most of what I'm going to present here is from the survey. This was fielded in the month of December. It was 1,000 voters, 18 and older. We had oversamples of Black, Latino, and Asian American voters. It was in English and Spanish, and it was the best methodology that exists, in my professional opinion, in this country. Political pollsters don't use them. It's a really robust methodology, and it's online, but it's based on probability sample. And if you don't have the internet, you don't have access to the internet, they provide it to you. So it's a very robust sample. So, all right, let's get into what we learned in the survey and kind of going beyond the traditional polling. This is a traditional question. In 73, the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision established a woman's constitutional right to have an abortion. Would you like to see the Supreme Court overturn its decision or not? 72% say no, 26% say yes. And when I look at all the polling in this that we've done on this issue, this is a more reflective break of where the public, where voters are. You have a majority on abortion, a majority sort of on the support women's rights and abortion, and you have about 25% who, yes, I want to overturn Roe. I want abortion really, illegal in all cases or just very, very rare. So this is more reflective of where voters are. In the survey, one of the things I wanted to explore, I sort of started, before I drafted the questionnaire, I thought to myself, what is this issue really about? Abortion, and I kind of came to this issue is about pregnancy and not wanting to be pregnant. And so we asked a ton of questions around pregnancy and views and experiences toward pregnancy. And by the way, in my mind when I started this, abortion is a topic that obviously relates to gender, but I didn't realize how much and in how many different ways gender intersects this issue. So I'm going to spend a minute on this slide because this summarizes some of the data. So if you look at, and this is on the left are results from women voters, on the right is from men. So we asked, how much does motherhood change a woman's life? 60% of voters say motherhood changes a woman's life completely. 38% of voters say fatherhood changes a man's life completely. We asked, have you ever had a time where you thought you might be pregnant or your partner might be pregnant and you felt dread or panic? 67% of sexually active 18 to 44-year-old women, so of reproductive age, have experienced dread or panic at a point when they thought they might be pregnant. 40% of sexually active men of the same age have experienced dread or panic because they thought their partner might be pregnant. 39% of women who have been pregnant said they felt dread or panic. By the way, we also asked about joy and excitement, which is pretty universal. But the dread and panic also, 4 in 10 women who've had been pregnant said they felt dread or panic. Only 29% of men voters who have had a pregnant partner. We asked, what's the average number of years you've spent trying to get pregnant among women? 2.3 years. We asked, what's the average number of years that you've tried to avoid getting pregnant? That's 12.6 years. So women spend many more years in their life trying to avoid pregnancy than trying to get pregnant. And, of course, that's not an issue that men face. 63% of women in reproductive age have had a time in their life when they felt grateful that legal abortion was an option. Only 36% of men in reproductive age. 65% of women voters of reproductive age can imagine a situation in which abortion might be the option for them. 56% of men voters of reproductive age. And I also wanted to focus on who, you see there's reproductive age here. I wanted to really look at who, at the end of the day, who does this issue really impact? It's people of reproductive age. But anyway, you zoom out here. When I zoom out, I see, okay, voters say that motherhood completely changes a woman's life. Most women have felt dread or panic, not men, at thinking they might be pregnant. They're more likely to feel dread or panic finding out they're pregnant. They're, of course, spending many years trying to avoid getting pregnant that men aren't. They're more likely, obviously, as a result of all these experiences, grateful that legal abortion is an option and can imagine abortion being the best option for them. We also asked questions, again, and I alluded to it in the last slide about, I wanted to ask questions grounded in reality, not this abstract, should it be illegal in all these cases? I want to think about it in reality. So we asked, has there ever been a time in your life when you were grateful that abortion was available? 48% of all voters, 63%, again, of women 18 to 44. That question I alluded to, can you imagine a situation in which abortion might be the best option for you or a partner? 56% of voters. So again, back to this narrative that voters are, this is divisive and polarizing and, voters are split. You have 56% not even, this isn't a theoretical policy sort of belief issue. This is 56% saying, yes, I can imagine a situation when this would be best for me. And 65% of women voters who, again, are most affected by this issue. Most voters do not have direct experience with abortion. They have not had an abortion. I think it's about 1 in 4 women right now. So we asked as a proxy, have you ever talked with somebody about their experience of having an abortion or somebody's personal decision to have one? As a proxy, again, for some real-life experience, who has had experience around this issue? 47% say yes, I have talked with somebody about the experience, about the decision to have one. 52% say no. Those most likely to have this direct experience, Democrat women and women of reproductive age, and then least likely men of all Democrat of all parties and ages. So again, another way that gender sort of breaks out here. We asked if a close friend or family member told you she had an abortion, would you give her a lot of support, some support, a little support, or I would not feel comfortable supporting her? 88% would give some level of support. Again, you can see 59% of voters say a lot of support. So there's a bunch of polling on, should abortion be illegal in the second trimester? And you ask a question one way, and they say yes. And then you say, here's an example. You can say, I know there's polling out there, and, Zika example. You see the percentages of voters who support or who oppose abortion in the second trimester completely reverse once they have a real example. So, and again, with restrictions, there's been all these restrictions. It's very difficult to poll on restrictions because people don't know anything about this issue. So if you poll about admitting privileges, doctors should have admitting privileges. Well, most voters have no idea that abortion is one of the safest medical procedures that exists, and it's in fact safer than a wisdom tooth removal. So in terms of risk. So it's very hard to get at polling on restrictions. So we said, in the focus groups, we just wanted to see, how do you want the experience to be of having abortion, accessing abortion? How do you want the woman to feel? So we had, and we heard all these things. Well, it was, by the way, the first one's from a Trump voter who thinks abortion should be illegal. He said, it should be like an outpatient procedure. It shouldn't have to drive. It should be local, not expensive. A Trump voter in Wisconsin, woman, said, I want her to feel in control. I want her to feel like she's doing the right thing. Trump man voter against abortion said, even though she's made the decision, her loved ones are going to be there. So we heard all of these things. And then we heard people say, I agree that the experience should be difficult. I feel like a lot of people who are getting abortions are younger. And I want, it should be a difficult experience. So we heard these and then tried to measure it in the survey, and here's what we found. We said, let's say a woman has decided to have an abortion. Again, one in 4 women make this decision. It's been legal for 45 years. So let's say woman decides. How do you want the experience to be? And really large majority saying informed by medically accurate information. I think 5 states require doctors to give women medically inaccurate information about the risks of abortion. That's why we had that in there. Safe, legal, comfortable, supportive, without protesters, affordable, without added burdens, non-judgmental, of 80% available in our community as soon as possible, supportive of our decision, covered by insurance. And then we said, one question we asked was, do you think the experience of getting an abortion should be similar to getting other medical care, or should it be more difficult? 64% similar to other medical care, 34% more difficult. We said, how do you want a woman who's decided to have an abortion, in that experience? How do you want her to feel? 88% supported by loved ones, dignity, in control, not punished, confident in her decision, 75% without shame, 73% not guilty. So again, and these are kind of binary, and I worry that these questions come off as biased in some way. Like I want her to feel shame or without shame, because they're just 2 binary categories. But I struggled. I didn't want to ask questions that were like, how much shame do you want a woman to feel? How much, it just seemed weird, how many protesters should there be? So that's why I kind of just did these 2 binary categories. And again, the percents that you see are different than what you might see or what you might expect among voters, given what we've all seen and what we all think the public thinks. We asked who should decide what procedures or care are used for abortion. So, because I think there's some bans out there on procedures. The woman tied with the doctor, then the woman and her partner, the medical profession, ACOG, the OBGYN Professional Association, then you can see Supreme Court, politicians in Congress, 4% politicians at the state level. Who should decide how far along in a pregnancy a woman can have an abortion? The doctor, the medical profession, ACOG, the woman and her partner, Supreme Court, politicians in Congress, again, 4% politicians at the state level. And again, I was kind of a little bit blown away by this. We were in Virginia among Trump then voters who said they want abortion illegal in all or most cases, that traditional polling question. And he said, well, this voter said something like, well, there's got to be a point. There's got to be a point at which, just kind of saying there's got to be a point. And the moderator just pressed him. Well, who decides where that point is? And he was like, well, doctors, and aside from doctors, family. And it's just like, wow, just something I didn't really expect. So again, you don't see these data out there because these questions aren't asked. So here's another thing in that focus group among men in Virginia, anti-abortion Virginia, 2 of the men of the 8. And this came up we did 6 focus groups, but this came up in 5 out of the 6 groups, how there's old white privileged men making laws for everybody else, including the Trump voters who want abortion illegal. One guy said, I think that those white men have probably, like myself, I've never been in a situation where I was pregnant and I didn't know what to do. And so I know how I feel about abortion, but without having a woman in the room, you just need all the opinions at the table when you're crafting this stuff. And it seems to be very one-sided, especially when it comes to crafting a law. I mean, you're talking about something that's going to affect 50% of the population and their rights. So this was fascinating to me because 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have never heard people consistent across men, women, views on abortion, views toward women, whatever, say that there are old white men making laws toward women. And I would have never heard anti-abortion Republican white men saying that there's too many white men making laws for women. So I measured this in a survey just to see, is this a fluke or what? 42% in our survey of Republican men, so they identify as Republican men, agree that men should not have a say in legislating what women do with their bodies. 37% say male politicians cannot represent the interests of women as well as female politicians. Among all voters, it's much bigger. But the fact that you do have 42% of Republican men, which Republican men, by the way, is only about 15% of voters. The rest are independent, Republican women, obviously, then independents, then Democrats. So that was eye-opening. So I did ask it, when you ask of all voters, do you think male politicians can represent the interests of women as well as female politicians? 62% say no, 36% say yes. 71% of women voters say no, they can't, versus 52% of men. By the way, these slides are available if anyone's interested. This is all public and online. We asked, so since everybody said there's old white men in office, we did ask a series in the survey, like, who do you think? Is it more men or more women in office or equal? Do you think it's more white or other races or representative? Do you think it's older, younger, or representative? 9 in 10 voters think it's old white men in office. So then we asked, can older white male politicians do a good job of representing these groups? People tend to say yes. 57% of voters say older white male politicians can do a good job representing men, white men, and then rich people. And then the rest, you only get 25, to about 30% saying they do a good job representing other groups. Again, another way, gender intersexist issue. Okay, women who have an abortion. We asked, what are your perceptions of the women who have an abortion? So the green bar is what voters think. The pink bar is reality. So 51% of voters, they think of someone in their teens when they think of somebody who has an abortion. Only 12% of women who have an abortion are actually in their teens. 60% are in their 20s, and 25% are in their 30s. Only 16% of voters think that women who have an abortion already have a child. 59%, however, in reality, of women who have an abortion already have a child. 60% of women in reality affiliate themselves with a religious faith. Only 40% of voters assume that. So lots of misperceptions about women who have abortions. Women of sort of all demographics tend to have abortions. We did ask, what comes closest to your view? Someone can be a good and moral person and have an abortion. 81% say yes, versus 17% who say someone cannot be a good and moral person and have an abortion. On the right there, 76% said having an abortion can be a responsible choice. 22% say having an abortion cannot be a responsible choice. So again, things kind of busting some of the myths that I think me or maybe some of us have thought about what we think the public thinks about women. The next findings are probably the ones that were most interesting to me, and I was in a focus group of anti-abortion Texas women, and I was a little bit blown away by the way they talked about this issue, especially the way they talked about women who had an abortion, and there were lots of misconceptions. And I'm going to show you one quote. This is in the lower left. This is a Trump voter who wants abortion illegal. She said, women who get abortions want to be a big dog somewhere in some company, and they don't want anything to inconvenience their path. They don't want to have to divide any of their time and energy to raising a kid properly. So that quote really stuck with me, and I thought, well, I want to explore this in the survey, and how do voters think about women? How do they think about gender roles and all of that? And here's what we found, that 26% who say, I want Roe v. Wade overturned, they actually have very different views toward women than the 72% of voters who don't want to overturn. So of those anti-abortion voters, 64% agree that I'm more comfortable with women having traditional roles in society, such as caring for children and family. Okay, so they're much more, over twice as likely to agree with feeling comfortable about traditional gender roles. 61% of anti-abortion voters say that male politicians can represent the interests of women just as well as female politicians can, versus 27% of people who support abortion rights. 64% disagree that men should not have a say in legislating what women do with their bodies. 46% disagree that the country would be better off with more women in political office. versus 18%. Then here's a fascinating one. We said, and the bottom two bar charts here, we split sampled. So half of respondents in the survey got asked the first question. In general, do you think women who have an abortion know what they are doing, that the abortion is ending a life or a potential life? Because I heard in focus groups, like, I just want her to know what she's doing. I want her to know her options. And people may not know what they're actually doing, so they need to be shown an ultrasound or whatever. So I was a little bit confused by this. But anyway, we asked, do you think women know what they're doing? 36% of the only 36% of anti-abortion voters say yes, a woman knows what they are doing, that an abortion is ending a life or potential life. Then we asked again, the other half of the sample, think about men who have a partner who has an abortion. Do you think the men know that abortion is ending a life or potential life? 51% say yes. So they're more likely to think the man in the relationship knows that abortion is ending a life. And this is true among people supportive of abortion rights too. But they're more likely to think a woman does know what's going on. So again, like this really, in my mind, bizarre almost relationship to gender and views toward women and whether they know what an abortion is and what they're doing. So anti-abortion voters say no, women who have an abortion, do not think women who have an abortion have considered all of their options. They do not think women who have an abortion have considered the life of the unborn child. 85% agree that too many women use abortion as birth control. 45% do not trust women to make their own decisions about having an abortion. We also asked about birth control. 33% do not trust women to make their own decisions about birth control or say they're not sure if they trust them. 75% agree that most women who have abortions have acted irresponsibly. 68% say having an abortion cannot be a responsible choice. And by the way, on the left there, we just looked up, 75% of women who have abortions are low income, including 50% below the federal poverty level. Most are women of color. And again, most have one child. And 3/4 cite the reasons for an abortion as concern for responsibility to other individuals, inability to afford a child, and belief that a baby would interfere with work, school, or the ability to care for their dependents. So anyway, it really, these were just fascinating to me. One more slide. Anti-abortion voters are less likely to say the woman should decide what procedures are used. They're more likely to say they want a woman who decides to have an abortion to feel vulnerable, not valued, and punished. And we even asked sort of this Handmaid's Tale question, do you think the government should require women to carry a pregnancy to term and give birth, even if it is against their will? 56% of anti-abortion voters say yes. And again, back to the pie chart, this is the 26% of voters who want to overturn Roe. All right, the last set of slides. So we wanted to use and measure opinion based on how people really talk. So in the focus groups, we heard this Trump voter say, this issue is way too politicized for me, in this upper left. I mean, out of all the social issues you could choose, this is the one that I give a shit the least about. But that being said, I'm pro-life. So we asked in the survey, agree or disagree. I don't think this issue should be so political or politicized. 78% of voters agree. 68% of Trump voters agree with that statement. And we heard that over and over in the focus groups, is this issue is way too political. By the way, even among those who want to overturn Roe, 51% say this issue is too politicized. Another Texas man, Trump voter, said, I don't think that anybody really has the right to tell anybody what they should do with their body. So we asked this, agree, disagree. I don't think anyone has the right to tell someone else what to do with their body, including whether or not to have an abortion. 77% of voters agree. Again, 59% of Trump voters. And even a majority of Republican men and women agree with that. Well, I think I respect life. That's the way I'm kind of cut. But I also believe that there are circumstances in which abortion is maybe the best option or the option chosen, and it's not really my right to make everybody feel the way I do. Agree or disagree, it's not really my right to make everybody feel the way I do on abortion. 81% agree, including 74% of Trump voters, including 57% of people who say they want to overturn Roe. I respect religions where they believe in no abortion, that's their choice, and I respect that women have a choice that they can do it. Do you agree or disagree? I respect religions that do not believe in abortion, and I respect that women have a choice to get an abortion. 79% agree, including Trump voters again. And even if you look at the table, the circle there, even churchgoers, 68% of voters who attend church once a week or more, 68% agree with that statement. It should be obvious, if us pollsters were doing our job well, that people can hold both of these beliefs. Abortion is killing a life or a potential life. Yeah, 73% agreeing, and also believing women should be able to make their own decision about abortion without government interfering. This is 78% agree with that. Okay. We were also exploring, back in the fall when we were designing questions for this study, there was a flurry of articles about how Democrats need to expand their tent on abortion. So we wanted to learn about that, so we asked, are you more likely to vote for a state or federal political candidate who supports women having the right to abortion, is against women having the right to abortion, or doesn't that make a difference in your vote? And surprisingly, again, when I'm thinking of the narrative out there, Democrats, 71% are more likely to vote for a pro-choice candidate. Only 8% are more likely to vote for an anti-choice candidate, and then 20% no different. So if you look at these bar charts, this issue is really an issue for Democrats. And Democrats who, try to widen their tent are really trying to go after that 8% at the risk of losing that 71%. So these findings are pretty clear. On the other hand, you look at Republicans who, if you're like me, expect them all to be unified against this issue. Republicans are the one segment of voters that are split on this issue. 31% are more likely to vote for a choice candidate, somebody who supports these rights. Only 36% are more likely to vote for a candidate who's against women having the right, and 30% make no difference. We look at independents, 46% more likely to vote for a choice candidate compared to just 15% more likely to vote for an anti-choice candidate. 37% make no difference. The last thing I'll just mention before we open it up, if anyone has any questions, we asked in the focus groups too, and then we measured in the survey, this topic of abortion does not break through to people except in political campaigns and debates. So we asked in the survey, how often does abortion come up in political campaigns? What is that? 79% say frequently or sometimes. What about outside of politics? Sometimes, rarely, or not too often. And so when I'm in focus groups with people, including in this project, asking, do you know what laws are on abortion? Have you heard about all these restrictions? And we were in Texas, Wisconsin, and Virginia, and we put all the laws just in front of them, and the restrictions in their state on abortion, and they're shocked. They're shocked. Many voters are angry. They're especially right now, we're in this moment in time where in every focus group I do among Democrats, rights, immigrant rights, women's rights, reproductive rights, and racism, civil rights is a top issue that is always brought up and talked about right now. And so it's an issue that's really important to them, but they have no idea what has happened in recent years. And this is one of the reasons, is because they only hear about this at campaign time. And at campaign time, that's not a learning experience. It's a totally political thing. There's no substance to the discussion, and so they don't learn. What do you tend to hear from the news media? The politics around abortion. 10% say the facts around abortion. So again, my sense is voters are really tuning out. The little bits of news and facts they do get is far outweighed by the politics. And when they get an article that's political and this side to that and that side to that, and the picture is protesters, I think they tune it out. I think voters right now are really as we all know, skeptical and cynical, and especially toward politics and news that is overtly, I could go on and on. But anyway, bottom line is likely your constituents, most of them have no idea what laws have passed, what laws exist, and that there have been 400 restrictions in the past, 6 or 7 years or whatever. And this is why. And so once we do show voters what's going on, there's quite a bit of outrage. So again, I'll just stop there and just see if anyone has questions. Again, this is all online. We have a big focus group report. Nobody is bored enough to read that, but that's online. And and feel free to follow up after this too if anybody has any questions. Kelly, I'll just pass it back to you. If you thought I missed anything or want to add anything, or just open it up.
Thank you. Yeah, let's open it up for questions. None came in via the chat function. So if you have a question, you can hit *6 on your phone. That'll put you in the queue, and then Vanessa will unmute you. So since that might take a moment while folks gather their questions and hit *6, Tresa, I wondered if you could just flash back to one of the earlier slides around I think the question was who should make decisions around abortion, and Congress and state lawmakers were at the bottom of that list. I was curious about how there was only a 2% difference between Congress and state lawmakers, but overall, did this come up in focus groups at all? Do you have any anecdotes around kind of this conversation of the role of state legislators in particular in making abortion policy that you can recall?
I think in terms of, yes. So this is exactly how we asked it in focus groups. Who should decide this? And again, if you ask a question in a survey that says, should we ban partial birth abortion, quote unquote, okay, you're going to get a majority saying yes to that question. But when you're in focus, when you're talking to real people and you say, who do you want deciding? It's not the Supreme Court. It's not politicians. And it's the woman and it's the doctor in combination. You can see the quote here. I trust the doctor, the medical profession, to say which ones are safe and appropriate. And then within that, maybe there's choices. Maybe you get a choice between the abortion pill, and the medical, and the other kind of abortion. So that's sort of the organic what comes up. And I think, especially if in the case of, I think there's D&E bans going on, especially in that case, voters are not going to have a good reaction to, most voters are not going to have a good reaction to politicians banning medical procedures that the medical profession say are the safest procedures. Yeah. Does that answer kind of?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, it tracks, of course, with one of the key talking points that probably, legislators on this call have been using for a long time, which is politicians shouldn't interfere in medicine, right? So I think, but to have that specific, last on the list for politicians at the state level, sorry all, to be deciding on this, I think maybe is helpful. And it's especially helpful, of course, in the terms of trying to defend against or defeat an abortion restriction. Maybe, needs some massaging when we think about pushing proactive policies and, the roles of state legislators in really taking that on, right? So, a little bit of a nuance there, but thank you. Vanessa, any questions that came in?
I do not have any questions yet.
All right. So, folks, remember you can *6 or you can chat something in. I'd also, the other standout for me, Tresa, of course, is around your last section around the big tent question and, the saliency of this issue within a progressive, party or infrastructure. And I think that's very resonant with what the Reproductive Freedom Leadership Council is trying to do and part of the point that we're making, which is that it's such a critical and central right to within the progressive framework that you can't really separate it from that. So I think that's important to highlight.
Yeah, and the fact that you don't get among Democrats, you don't get an even split saying no difference or more likely. it's pretty strong. I am more likely to vote for a candidate that supports this versus, not even, it doesn't even make a difference.
Exactly. Are there any next steps around this research that you're planning on, Tresa, that might be interesting for this audience to know?
No, I think it's, there have been some stories on it in the press. I think there's another story coming out soon. It's a pretty expansive survey. The full report is, I don't know how many slides, but it's a pretty big study. So I think it's probably just going to be out there and probably will be used in some shape or form, I'm assuming. Just because, for me, this is the best issue to work on as a researcher because so little good polling exists. You don't have to be a genius to think about. I think you do maybe have to be a woman. Don't quote me on that, but to ask some different questions on this issue and to get at a better picture of how voters feel on this issue. So I think it hopefully it'll be used out there and get some attention. And again, I'm available for if anyone else has, at a later point when people are dealing with, legislation or talking to voters or whatever, we're available to chat or brainstorm or, whatever might be useful.
Great. Yeah, and I'd echo that offer to help as well. So any legislators or staff on this call, if you're interested in kind of using some of these findings or digging deeper or incorporating them into some of your work, whether it's an op-ed or floor statements, press, speeches, talking points on a bill, anything like that, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to help with that and loop in Tresa. I'm putting her on the spot by offering that, but, we can help make this useful to you, in a way that I think can resonate with whatever it is that you're working on. So feel free to reach out, Kelly at stateinnovation.org, if this interests you, and we can figure out what that looks like.
And Kelly, that actually goes well with a question we just got. Is there a messaging guide in the works based on the findings from this survey?
Kelly, I think NIRH is doing. Yes. Do you know about that?
Yeah, so we have done. We've done some. We've had NIRH, National Institute for Reproductive Health, do some presentations on some of their connected research to this, and I know you're right. They have the message guide just about coming out, or it's out already. So I will make sure that gets circulated to this group as well.
And I think on messaging, again, voters don't know what's been going on this issue, so it's really important to educate them. It's important to say there have been 401 laws passed since 2010 because, again, people are shocked. They haven't heard about this. And what we're hearing around the country is sort of this theme. Everybody's worried about people's rights being taken away right now. And they're also, I hear this theme of control. There's too much government control. This just sense of control and taking away rights. So the flip side of that is, rights, taking away rights and control is freedom, freedom to control your own body, control your own life's path, and that kind of thing. And that's sort of the messaging that we're hearing that is really powerful right now. So you'll probably, and that will be, I think, in what NIRH is working on right now, developing. So that just sort of a foreshadowing of what messaging is important.
Great, thank you. Vanessa, last call for any questions that have come in?
I am not seeing any more.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating. We will be sending out the recording. We do have the PDF of the slides if that's your preferred format, so just reach out. And I will also dig up that NIRH message guide that was mentioned and share that as part of the follow-up email on this as well. And Tresa, thank you so much for this work and for sharing it with us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. All right, everyone, have a great day. And again, reminder, we have a Ask an Abortion Provider webinar for RFLC members happening at this time next week. So reach out if you have not gotten that invitation yet. And we hope to see you there. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.